I like to think of standards as sort of the final destination on a map. They are where we want our students to go eventually. And we get to create that map, curriculum map, the unit plan, dare I say the lesson plan, that actually get our students to the mastery of those standards, that get our students to that final destination. In being that we get to create those daily lessons, within those lessons are what I call checkpoints. And those checkpoints are the learning objectives or targets or whatever it is that you call them. Now, these learning targets build off of each other. They get our students to the eventual mastery of a standard. I almost think of them as like slices of a pizza. So your pizza is the standard and your learning targets are the slices that make up that whole. And each objective that we have is taught within a lesson. You might have a prescribed curriculum or a unit. We've got standards that are provided to us through Common Core or through your state. But ultimately, if you look at learning targets, what we want our students to be able to do by the end of each lesson, you create them, you decide how you want to teach them. How do we actually create these objectives? So if we think of them as sort of the slices of the pizza and the pizza being your standard, not to throw analogies around, you have to take your standard and break it up into those individual slices. So the first thing you're going to do to create an objective is take a single standard and identify and write down the prerequisite skills necessary for that standard to be mastered. That's going to be the first thing that you do. The second thing that you do is, now that you've got those prerequisite skills, you select one skill and you write it out using an action verb to create an outcome. Demonstrate, explain, justify, solve. You'll connect it with the prerequisite skill to create an objective, an outcome. Now, the third thing is to ensure that the objective that you have created is observable and measurable. This is the real game changer. If your objective isn't clear, if we can't observe it or look for it, then you're gonna have a really difficult time measuring it, and you'll waste your time and energy trying to figure out, how do I know what my students know and don't know on this objective? So of course, I'm gonna give you an example as to what this looks like and how it's done. So let's say I have this standard, cite several pieces of textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. A lot going on there. So the first thing I need to do with that single standard, if that's my big pizza, is I need to break it up into individual slices. What are the prerequisite skills involved in this single standard? Students are citing evidence to support analysis, then they need to know what strong evidence is and what it looks like. If they are supporting inferences, they need to know about making predictions and recognizing the difference between implicit and explicit details, different text structures, pro, con, similarities and differences, argumentative, literature. That's just some of the breakdown of the standard. These layers or these slices are my prerequisite skills. When I connect it with an action verb, will turn into an objective. So let's pick one of the prereq skills that I just named out. Students knowing what strong, relevant evidence looks like. Now I'm going to consider those action verbs. So what do I want my students to know and be able to do with strong, relevant evidence? I want them to be able to identify strong details that support an argument of what a text says. So my objective would be, by the end of this lesson, students will be able to identify relevant evidence to support an argument or claim in a text. 3, I've got to ensure that it's observable and measurable. I'm going to plan for one lesson. By the end of this lesson, that seems like a realistic time frames. My formative assessment data, which is the way that I'm measuring it, will let me know if my students need more explicit instruction or not. I know that I will continue to revisit identifying strong evidence because it is such a major component of that standard. So if my students don't 100% master it within the first day of me teaching this, that's okay, because there are ample opportunities for them to practice that. Not that this is really a step in creating objectives, but I do think that it's very important to share knowing how to sequence your objectives and sequencing them appropriately. It is a game changer. So you want to consider the progression of learning and ensure that those objectives really flow concurrently and coherently from one lesson to the next. If you want to learn more about how to measure an objective, head to any one of my videos on my channel, particularly how to turn your data into instructional action.